You know, we often try to put financial costs on addictive behavior, but the personal costs are even higher. People get sick, some die, others drive while under the influence and kill others, families disintegrate, and yes, businesses go broke. This is part one of a two-part program on these issues. In part two, we'll talk about what's being done, but on part one, we're going to examine the size of the problem and its causes and costs.
Well, it's extremely dangerous in the sense that, yeah, you could die at any moment. I mean, this is a deadly disease. It's also a very diminishing disease. People that do live with this illness in isolation, in darkness, alone, live horrible lives. Most people, I talk about addiction as similar to dancing with an 800-pound gorilla. And you keep dancing until the gorilla stops dancing, and an 800-pound gorilla will dance wherever it wants. It will dance in the White House. It will dance in the poorhouse. My 800-pound gorilla went into full Macarena for a few years, but that was my gorilla. But this is a difficult dance, and it's painful. Many people in society look at this illness and they look at the addict or the alcoholic as somebody who's to blame. This is a chronic brain disease. It needs treatment. It's seen as a chronic brain disease. But most people are looked at by society as having some kind of fault in it.
The real reality is once you begin to talk about this problem, you're talking about a specific dysfunction in your own family. Something's wrong.
It's interesting, too. I mean, when I got sober, it was like a big mirror. I held a big mirror up to my family for the first time, and they were much more comfortable, even though they wanted me to get well, they were much more comfortable on some level in the way I was.
There are a lot of dynamics for the individual just to sustain the use of that much drugs or alcohol that really compromise their character. Whether it's lying to family, stealing from neighbors, cheating on hours at work. There's a lot that goes in that really does wreck a person's self-image. And so addictions really do rob people of their sense of self and even pride in themselves. And most people, their shining moments are not under the influence of alcohol or drugs. They're just not. Our prisons are full of people. YouTube has plenty of videos to watch about foolish, intoxicated behavior, not just for the individual, but for their families as well. And there's a lot of shame and guilt because of that, and also because of something that Chris alluded to earlier, is that sort of a broad perception that this is sort of a choice. It's a personal choice. It's a moral failing. Right. And what I would say to that is that's a really outdated way of thinking. Addiction starts with a personal choice, just like some other chronic medical conditions, whether or not that's obesity, which we see skyrocketing in our country. That starts as a personal choice. No one begins to eat in a certain way to say, someday I hope to have high cholesterol. We don't. We eat, we don't exercise, we don't give thought to the long-term consequences. That's part of human nature. But what we now know from a lot of really good research is that when you use drugs and alcohol in a large amount over a long-term period, you change the way your body functions, and most importantly, the way your brain functions.
This is a disease that's genetic. It's really very simple. I have a 15-year-old son. Both of his parents are in recovery. Both of his parents are chemically dependent. Instead of an IRA for education, I need an IRA for treatment. Because he's going to experiment. He's going to have a beer. He's going to smoke a joint. The difference is he can't do it the same way his friends can.
If you grow up around drugs and alcohol, you've got the environmental component. How do you decide if it's a genetic component or an environmental component?
Well, that's a most difficult problem. I did not grow up in an environment of alcohol. But I relocated 9 times by the time I was in the 12th grade. So there was a lot of moving around. My way of identifying with people ended up being drugs and alcohol. I was a result of the peer pressure that existed. I wanted to belong. And that's how I got connected.
It doesn't really matter, though, right? Where it comes from, you have it, you have to deal with it, you have to treat it. The treatment's the same whether you got it environmentally or from your parents. For me, was not a choice, and I tried to get sober for many years, and I didn't. And if you had seen me at age 27 with those degrees in the middle of this thing, you would have said, you're a dead man. And I stand before you today 23 years sober.
Visit our website at McQuestionTV.com to view and discuss past and present McQuestion TV episodes and subject matter. You can also follow McQuestion TV on Twitter at McQuestion TV or download McQuestion TV video podcasts on iTunes.